Laura, thank you very much for that introduction, for your brilliant chairing of today's event, and your fantastic work campaigning in Harlow. And it's always was a pleasure to campaign alongside you. And I will be again, wherever you stand, whatever you do, because you've done an absolutely brilliant job there. Big thank you also to Matt for all the organising that's gone into the Arise events, plus all the people that are working with and supporting Matt, and all the other speakers today. I've managed to listen to most of it this afternoon. But like Ian Lavery, I would be much happier to be at Durham this afternoon. I go to Durham pretty well every year, and it's an amazing event, an amazing expression of solidarity from the former mining communities, and the principle and that spirit of the mining communities is there in all the campaigns that come to Durham. And so I think the lesson there is community organising in a real sense works. Community organising in a real sense works and educates, enthuses and empowers people. And that surely is what it has to be about. I'm obviously very sad at the general election result that we got. And it was a devastating night on December the 12th when the results came in. And whilst we did get over 10 million votes, we didn't gain the seats we needed in order to form a Labour government. All through that campaign, we put forward a very effective manifesto, cautious in some respects, but a manifesto that was about redistributing power and wealth within our society. And all those ideas individually were actually very popular, all of them. Housing, environment, education, health, social care, broadband, all the issues that we put forward were very, very popular. But for 5 years, we had unremitting attacks on us from the mainstream media. The analysis done of the 2019 campaign by a number of very reputable people in a number of our colleges and universities shows that in the last week of the campaign, 97% of media coverage was negative or hostile to Labour. Individuals were absolutely pilloried. Those people that have been on this call this afternoon, and many others, Dawn, Diane, John, Richard, myself and others, absolutely brutally treated by the media. Ian Lavery pilloried by the Sunday Times at various moments in the past few years, and so on. And so it shows to me the importance of communicating an effective message all the time to our friends and to our supporters and to our potential supporters. The form of communication we're doing today, Zoom, is a way of bypassing the medium of the billionaire-owned press. It is a way of communicating directly with people. But there's actually no substitute for being out there at the workplace, at the bus station, at the train station, at factory gates, wherever else it happens to be, doing that campaigning work and that discussion with people. And the points that John just made about all the disputes that are coming up are so important. So don't let anybody trash the 2019 manifesto. So when we go into policy reviews in the party, let's build on what we achieved, on what John achieved in promoting an economic strategy which didn't accept austerity or the management of the economy, sought to transform the economy. The total change that Diane brought about in Home Affairs policy and strategy, what she achieved in having a sensible, serious conversation about the value of those people that have made their homes in this country and made such an incredible contribution. And the way that she, more than anybody else almost, in 2014, called out Theresa May on the Windrush scandal that was coming. It wasn't a surprise to any of us because Diane had already analysed exactly what was going to happen with the hostile environment that was being created. And so we built that campaign and we built that sense of unity in what we were doing. And so build on that. I've got just beside me here an example of one of the things we do. GB Rail, the proposals developed by Andy MacDonald as Shadow Transport Secretary for a fully publicly owned and publicly run rail system in this country. I was condemned for wanting to spend substantial amounts of money on investment in housing, investment in education, investment in health, investment in a green industrial revolution to create the good quality jobs, well-paid, skilled jobs for the future, to unleash what is there in all of our young people, their creative endeavours and imagination through the pupil arts premium, to put the resources where they're needed in those communities whose jobs and industries were destroyed on the altar of monetarism under Margaret Thatcher from 1979 onwards, and actually haven't seen a return yet to all that they need. So I was condemned for that. I remember on the next podium to Boris Johnson during the debates we held in Sheffield and the other one in Maidstone, he said, "We can't afford any of that stuff. You're going to spend far too much money." Well, I think the crisis has shown that when even Tories need the money, they find it. We were prepared to find that money to invest in what people need. But that investment would have been fair. That investment would have been where it was needed. And what we now see through the corona crisis is a number of things. One, that it's not even. It affects the poorest and most vulnerable the worst. It's not something that is going to simply go away. The ideas that Boris Johnson and others were lecturing myself and John Ashworth and others about, called herd immunity, are nonsense. Just absolute nonsense. A eugenics theory. There has to be an effective health service. The World Health Organization warned of the corona crisis early in January. Boris Johnson chose to ignore those warnings. And they pointed out that countries that didn't have a universal health service would be the most vulnerable. Look at the relative death rates and infection rates around the world, and you'll see exactly what I mean by that. And now you look at the analysis of who has been affected by the corona lockdown. The poorest people in the poorest places, in the largest families, have suffered the most. You might say, quelle surprise, it's a Tory government. Well, it's not right. It's simply not right. And I suspect many people are going to be threatened with job loss when the furlough scheme comes to an end. If we're putting money into the private sector, I don't particularly have a problem with public money going in to defend jobs. In fact, I absolutely support that. It's exactly what John McDonnell was demanding of the government when the corona crisis was growing very fast in February and March. It's exactly the points he was making. But if we're putting money into sustain large private sector companies, then that must also be accompanied by a public stake in those companies so that we, the public, get a benefit from those companies when better times begin to come. And so I think we need to recognise that our NHS has only survived through this crisis because of the principle behind the NHS and because of the incredible levels of dedication of all workers within the NHS, and at last a realisation that people that various Home Secretaries have described as unskilled, cleaners, are pretty important when you need a clean hospital, a clean bus, a clean train, a clean school. Let's start treating all workers with the respect that they deserve and recognise that those BAME communities that work so hard within the NHS and care and local government and so on have disproportionately suffered and died because of the corona crisis. The inequalities are writ large in everything. A couple of other points I just want to make are these. There is another global crisis, and that's the environmental crisis around the world. It's not going to go away, it's going to intensify. It's not just about CO2 emissions and global warming. It's also about destruction of our biodiversity. It's also about the pollution of rivers, seas, and skies. Some people, during the lockdown, for the first time, breathed clean air. For the first time, children growing up in New Delhi actually saw the beauty of many of the buildings there. The same applied in many other big cities around the world. We've got to clean up our environments. I was looking forward to leading a government that would go to COP26 with a determination to get to net zero by 2030. That's what Becky Long Bailey was working for. That's what we were all working for. So we make those demands anyway, whether we're in government or not in government. We mount those campaigns anyway, and we do them with other people as well. And so our program of investment in the economy, of social justice, of recognizing the ability that's there in all people was very empowering. Power comes from where you are and what you're prepared to do. So when people stand up to defend their jobs, we go alongside them. When people stand up to demand new industries, new jobs, a cleaner society, we're with them on that. It's how we campaign on things. But it's also what we do in solidarity with each other. I've been involved in no end of Zoom calls. In fact, this room has been the basis of most of the meetings I've done over the past few months. And some of them have been absolutely enormous. I did a Zoom conference call with Arundhati Roy from India, and we had people on from all over the world. Hundreds of thousands watched it. I did a similar discussion with Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, about environment and social justice and many other issues. We had, again, a very, very large number of people on. We can now relate to each other because we're now used to doing it this way. After Corona crisis means that we go back to having meetings and rallies and demonstrations. Let's not forget that these systems are there and enable us to talk to people from all over the world in a much simpler way. And so, international solidarity, and I was proud to put this in the manifesto, meant that we would go into government with a manifesto commitment that was about a foreign policy based on human rights, based on democracy, based on peace, and that we would raise all those issues. The Tories claim that they were in favour of human rights and were going to take stern action against individuals who commit human rights abuse. I remember that very well because whilst a number of us were demonstrating outside General Pinochet's house while he was under house arrest in Britain, Margaret Thatcher was inside visiting him. The Tory solidarity with the dictators of Latin America goes back a very long way. And so, yes, of course there should be sanctions taken against individual abusers of human rights. And the one great success of the Pinochet campaign was a declaration by the British courts that where crimes against humanity are concerned, the jurisdiction is universal. I agree with that and support that. But you can't be taken seriously on human rights if the following day you decide to resume arms sales to Saudi Arabia with its appalling human rights record and the war in Yemen, which has made the people of Yemen the most desperate and poorest on the face of the whole earth at the present time. Any more than you can pass by on the other side for the massive refugee flows that have come to Jordan, to Lebanon, to Bangladesh and other places because of human rights abuse. Think for the Rohingya people, more than 1 million in refugee camps in Cox's Bazar at the present time. So we have to stand up for those rights as well. And we will continue to do that. And oppose the Trump plan for the annexation of the West Bank by the Israeli government, which is what he's proposing at the present time. I did the last meeting of Palestine Conference last Sunday on this. And again, we had a huge global audience. And so when we engaged in campaigns in international solidarity, they're part and parcel of the same things that we're doing here. Because the global corporations that are being empowered and funded by this Tory government are doing the same things in other countries. So those global movements are very important. So we work with our friends in the USA and other countries in order to challenge that power. Socialism is about empowering people, is about real democracy where everyone has that voice and that ability to take part in decision making. And it's not just about elections, it's about what you do between elections, it's about how you campaign to achieve things. Those that founded our movement in the 18th, 19th century, they didn't actually ever thought they'd be in office. They were determined to change their communities. Ian was talking earlier about the spirit of the mining communities in Durham. Those organised communities that set up their community centres, their libraries, their education programme, empowered working class people to achieve change in those communities. The National Health Service is based on what happened in Tredegar in the 19th and 20th century. And so Arise has given us the chance all to talk and listen to each other, and it's been absolutely fascinating. But we've got to stick together, campaign together with all those principles that brought us together. I want to say thank you to everyone for the personal friendship and support they gave me during the past 5 years. I haven't gone away, I'm around. And I'm going to be around campaigning alongside everybody else, because that is what we do. But it's also important that we stick together and campaign together. So when the policy reviews come along, and the submissions have to be in by the 20th of July, I'm proud of what we had in our manifesto. I'm proud of the policy changes that we achieved. Let's not just defend those, let's take them a bit further. We developed the Green Industrial Revolution a long way. It can go much further. We need to develop much further the principles behind the National Education Service, education as a right, not a privilege. We need to end any element of privatisation within the National Health Service, including ending the disastrous private finance initiative programs, and bring the social care sector into the public sector. And, of course, in housing, regulate and control the private rented sector, invest in council housing, invest in the principle that everyone deserves somewhere decent to live. Having somewhere decent to live is a pretty basic principle, and we can achieve it. So, thank you everyone for being on this call. Thank you everyone for all the work you do. And together, we are very strong. And it's about bread and roses too. So it is about our cultural expression as well. So work together, be strong together, but above all, stand in solidarity with those that are suffering the most. That way, we'll defeat the racists who want to divide us. And we stand in solidarity in the memory, not just of George Floyd, but all those others that have been killed by racism around the world. So, we learn our history as well, and history, properly learned, can empower us. Thank you very much.